Welcome to the Art Studio Insights podcast, where we demystify the creative process and exchange ideas with career-minded artists. We are your hosts, Adriana, May, and
Jackie Sanders. We're two emerging artists sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our journey. So if you're not already, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop a new episode every week.
Yeah, and on this week's episode, it's special. We are delighted to partner with Triangle Artworks to host a panel discussion on market applications. So it's a little bit different than our usual episodes, but first, let me share with you, Triangle Artworks is a local nonprofit organization in our area, and they work to provide services, support, professional development for the art sectors across all artistic disciplines in all 5 counties of the Triangle region of North Carolina. And they host all kinds of discussions and events that we've actually had, and we've been lucky to be able to attend, and it's been a lot of fun. So we're very, very lucky to be able to partner with them on today's episode.
Right. And especially when talking about the idea of art market applications, because applications can be such a difficult part of selling your work, because you don't always know why you don't get into a show when you apply. There's so many factors that go into it, from photography to your social media presence. So all of these go into picking the right shows for you, which we discussed on the panel. So the panelists included 2 market runners, Lindsay Chester and Jeannie Steck, both who are part of the Market Runners Forum, and they've both juried shows with over 30 years of experience in select communities.
Yeah, so it was really cool to have them on board with us, as we kind of went back and forth with some questions that get asked by, folks that are curious or maybe already experienced doing shows. But yeah, basically, like, the theme behind this discussion that we recorded for you was to help artists that want to make sure they put their best foot forward in show and event applications. So a lot of different tips and tricks that they shared. Whether you're new to this or, again, you've been exhibiting a while, we talked about different strategies on how to improve your show application, and get tips directly from the folks that review applications for these types of shows. So it was really good to kind of get to know the behind the scenes of some of this and kind of what they're looking for. And yeah, we got to share that with you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So thank you so much, Triangle Artworks, for having us host this discussion. As always, we will have show notes linked below, which will include information on both of our panelists as well as Triangle Artworks, so you can stay up to date with their upcoming events.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Jackie. I have a studio in downtown Raleigh at Art Space, and I do abstract geometric art. My partner in crime over here. Introduce yourself.
I am Adriana. I'm a Puerto Rican artist based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I also have a studio at Art Space, just down the hall from Jackie. And I mostly do botanical and abstract art. And we are super, super excited that you are joining us this evening.
So, as Cynthia just talked about in the intro, we do have a podcast that we created really because we wanted to share, just like Triangle Artworks does, all of the experience and knowledge we have learned along our creative journeys with fellow emerging artists. So we launched the Art Studio Insights podcast this past summer. We have new episodes every single Tuesday on all streaming platforms. So if you want to go ahead and subscribe, we're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So we do also have video with every episode, because after all, we are visual artists. So we like seeing faces and beautiful artwork. And so we do remind everyone to try to keep your microphones muted during the talk, but we have amazing panelists here today to talk about market applications.
Absolutely. So thank you again for joining us. We will be releasing a the recording, I should say, of this panel discussion next Tuesday. So if for whatever reason you have to jump off early, do know this is recorded and you can finish it later on. But obviously, hopefully you stay with us so that if we have time for questions at the end, you'll have a chance to interact versus a recording. You can't. obviously. So very excited. Like Cynthia mentioned, we're doing this in partnership with Triangle Artworks. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to collaborate with you. And we are super, super excited that we have with us Jeannie and Lindsay as our panelists today.
Yes. So if you ladies, you want to give a brief introduction about you, your interaction with Triangle Artworks, and then we can start diving into our topic of talking about holiday markets. So Jeannie, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Okay, great. So hi folks, I'm Jeannie Steck. Personally, I'm a jewelry artist. I'm also chairperson of the Wake Forest Guild of Artists, and I'm on the board for Arts Wake Forest. So I'm coming at this from two different angles as a market runner and a participant in markets. I've known Cynthia and Triangle Artworks for several years now and really appreciate everything that Triangle Artworks does for the art community.
So I'm Lindsay Chester.
Yes.
I am my company is Good Tree Studio. I run two festival size markets. One is the Farmers Fall Festival, which is coming up on September 25th. That's in downtown Cary. And I run Fest in the West, which is out in Western Cary. Each of those events have been going on for 4 and 5 years. I am also an artist, but I do not participate in shows because that's just too much for me. So I sell art on the side and do commissions. I'm a painter and watercolor and graphic designer. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I know Triangle Artworks since I was on the Town of Cary's Cultural Arts Committee and met Beth Yurtza when she was first forming Triangle Artworks. So I have also served on the Smash the Arts event, which helps artists connect with opportunities. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about how I know Triangle Artworks. I'm happy to be here tonight. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, we both absolutely love Smash. So if anyone is on this call and doesn't know about the Triangle Artworks Smash event, it is so much fun and a great place to network. So
yeah,
we're super excited for when they can be happening in person again. But
and in the meantime, real quick, there was a Smash-ish happy hour that happened not long ago. So stay tuned if you're not already on the Triangle Artworks newsletter, so that if there's another in-person event to tide us over until a big Smash event can happen, that's going to be the first place where you can find out. So
yeah,
definitely keep an eye on that.
Yeah, they're always a great way to exchange ideas with other artists and just connect with creatives, as well as a great place to hear about amazing events like different markets in the area. So I know Adriana has had experience with markets, but I'm super excited for this panel because I have literally done 0 markets as an artist. So I do have a lot of questions. A lot of people may be able to relate. 2020 was going to be my year to start art markets. So I have a lot of questions now that they're starting to pop up again. So first thing to get started, there's a couple of different verbiage that I want to clarify. So really, what's the difference between a juried market and an unjuried market, or a juried show, an unjuried show?
Okay. So, well, a juried show would be one where you send in your application. Generally, there's an application deadline. And then after that deadline, the committee members, or it may be should be an impartial group, gets together and looks at all of the applications. And then basically they rate each application to make decisions on who is going to be in the show. Like in some cases, you're rated on a scale of 1 to 5, and I'm saying 5 is the highest. So then they basically will go from those highest numbers to pick who will be in the show. And the juried show, they try to balance out to make sure that there's a certain number for each category and that one category isn't overrepresented. And then a show that's not juried, maybe it's first come, first serve. I've applied to events like that where the vendors, the artisans are selected just first come, first serve. You send in your application, you're in.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
So cool. Yeah.
And often they're not looking at the quality of the work or balancing out the show.
Right.
And
It
then-
kind of keeps that level playing field for whoever wants to participate and is local can participate.
So it could
Right.
give a chance for somebody
would-
very
I
much
would
starting
tag
out.
on, I would tag on to what Jeannie said, because she did mention the quantities of different artists. So the point of the markets is not just obviously for the market runners to have a great market for themselves, but it is,
Right.
in their best interest to have it be good for the vendors. And so in order to do that, you always get a ton of applications for people that make jewelry, and jewelry is popular, but you can't have, if you only have 50 artists, you can't have 10 of them be jewelry. You really need to spread it around. You have to also consider who's coming to your show and what are they looking for. And so a lot of times that also encompasses, like, what are the price points of your work? Because if you're selling very expensive leather handbags, but the crowd that's coming is looking for inexpensive jewelry, it's just not a good fit. So, I would just add that in there.
Yeah. So if an artist, say, gets rejected, it may not necessarily be the quality of the work. It could also be there's too many of that category.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Or more highly competitive categories or price points for the given location. And I think that's a really good point too, especially for the whole application process. Of there are so many factors, which we'll be talking about on this. Like, there's so many factors that go into why someone won't be a good fit for a certain market. Sometimes it has to do with improving the quality of your work or product, but other times it's factors like that that are really out of your control. And so I remind all artists on here, or that might be listening, is that really understanding that there's such a bigger picture when it comes to markets, because you want to curate the experience.
And that it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's not
add that too. It's not
it's
about
not
you.
necessarily a reflection on the art. Sometimes it might be the quality of the art. Maybe it's not on par with what, the market is supposed to be about, but it's still not personal. There's still probably a market out there for you. But let me hop on to the next question. So, which actually ties into this very well. So how can an artist know if they're a good fit for a market?
If it's a market that occurs regularly, I would encourage people to visit those markets and take a look at who's coming and what the market looks like, and get a general feel, because you'll be able to see what are the price points, who's usually there, and do you fit in?
And
That's a great way too, especially to experience the market for yourself and see if the drive to the market. The commute is also a factor when choosing. Also the location, you can normally understand the energy of a certain space, and if you want to apply for it too.
How about from your end, Jeannie?
I was going to say pretty much the same thing as Lindsay. If you have the opportunity, visit the market or the festival beforehand. When I first moved to North Carolina, I didn't apply to a lot of shows. I went and visited them first and then decided, is this going to work for me? And then check the website of the event, see who's been participating in the past. How do you fit in? Jewelry, we come back to that a lot, but that's a big one, because you want to see if you are on par with other folks who've been accepted in the past. And sometimes it's a crapshoot. You've just got to go and try it.
Yeah.
If it works for you. And the other thing is, if you've gone and maybe 1 month, if it's a monthly market, if it's not good that month, try it again the next time. Give it a shot more than once before you give up on something, because another thing that often happens is people attend these markets, they don't buy right away. They need to see you more than once. They go home, and I've had people call and say, I've been dreaming of that. I should have bought it. I said, yeah, you should have bought it. But
Yes.
sometimes it's just a matter of looking and seeing who's there, and you have to decide for yourself. Don't change what you do to meet the market. You have to find your customer.
That's a great
really
point.
good
That's a
point.
great point. I would also say, look at how those market vendors display their goods and make sure that you're up to that display. Like if people are
That's a great
super
point.
casual and it's a very casual market and not fancy, then you don't have to really up your game. But some markets, the tents have gotten to be very much like little stores. And if that's what they're doing, then that's what the market attendees are expecting as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really making sure that your display is up to caliber for the type of market that you're applying for. So let's say if you have a market that maybe you've been to once or twice. I know people are creatures of habit, so we all have a handful that we kind of go to a lot. You have a dream of going or being a vendor at one market. How much does, from an application standpoint, how much does your artist statement play a role in your application?
Well, I would say honestly, with my festivals, I'm really not so much into the artist statement as I am into the description of the actual goods. Sometimes people are very general. They'll just say, I do silver jewelry, or something like that. And so you really need to describe what you do a little bit more. Is there, some people have a greater purpose to what they do, like if there's a donation factor or they're helping the community, or that there's a story behind what they do, that can make it be so much more understandable for us to say, yes, let's put them in the market.
Very awesome.
Yes. The same thing. Often we'll look at photos first, but then we will take a look at what the artist has to say about the work. And like Lindsay said, how is the work made? If it's super general, it's not going to tell us enough about that artist. So I would say it's secondary to the photos, but it's a very important piece that could push you over the top. If your statement really shows your passion or tells us a little bit about your process or about the materials that you're using, it will give you that edge over the person that just says, I make silver jewelry.
Right. I think the more information that you can include in your application, like if the application has room for descriptions, use it. Use every bit of every character that's open to you, because it just gives us a better idea. Like if it's asking for your social media pages, please put them on there, because we'll go and look at them.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big thing too, is making sure, like, don't just assume that whoever's looking at your application is gonna go through the effort of looking for your social. There's a space there for a reason. And as we're going through all these questions, I just want to talk to the artists watching real quick. If you guys have any questions that we aren't covering, feel free to drop them in the chat, where I'm keeping an eye on it on a separate monitor over here. So if you have questions or feedback on things that we're talking about, go ahead and share them in a chat and we can bring them up to the panelists.
Yeah, and that way if it's not something, that we're discussing, maybe we can just do it at the end, but definitely throw those in there. But perfect segue, speaking of photos. So, you kind of answered, yes, the photos are important, but all right, I'm just going to throw this one out there and see what y'all think about it. So let's say, hypothetical, right? I'm going to throw a curveball at you. All right, so we understand photos are important. Great. Let's say there's only space for 4 photos. Is it frowned upon if one of these photos has more than one piece in it? So let's say it's jewelry or it's paintings, is it frowned upon to make a collage photo in order to show you more, as long as it's clean and not cluttered and it's cohesive, mind you? But would that be frowned upon? And sorry, double question. How important, speaking of photos, do you find to have a photo that shows what your table or your setup looks like? So sorry, it's a double one on photos, but essentially, can you collage? Is that frowned upon? If there's a limitation on amount of photos to submit, and then secondly, how important is it to have either a booth shot or even if it's just the table mock-up setup of some sort? All right, who wants to go first?
Jeannie looked like she was ready to jump in, so please do.
Okay. Photos are a big deal. As far as a collage, it's usually not a good idea to have a collage. It might be if you're a potter and you a ceramicist and you have a bathroom set, possibly that could be put together because that is it's a grouping that does go together. If you have a necklace and a pair of earrings, maybe you could put those two together. But generally you want one piece in your photo and you want it to showcase that photo. So you're not going to take that photo on your bedspread.
True.
You're laughing, but we get it's very obvious. And I did that way back a long time ago, but you want the image of your piece to stand out. If you are a 2D artist, generally you don't want to frame in that. You want to be able to take the photo and only see your 2D image. And you don't want it to be taken at an angle. We had an artist come to the Wake Forest Guild of Artists. We had a photographer talk about and actually demonstrate how to take photographs. And I believe his video is on our website. So it might be something, the Wake Forest Guild of Artists.org. wakeforestguild.org, sorry. So that's something that you can look for. And he really did a great job explaining the best way to take photos of your work. Your photos should look as professional as possible. It doesn't mean you have to have a professional take them, but you need to have them look professional. As far as your booth, many events ask for a booth shot. So your booth shot can show other pieces of your work that are representative of what you do. So that would be one way to show additional work. A lot of artists have big blown up photos or banners of their work in their booth shot. So that gives the jury another chance to see what your booth looks like. Does it look professional? And they get a chance to look at other pieces of your work that way. The other thing with your photos, many events use a blind jury, meaning that there's no identifying markings on your work or in your booth. So if you're going to take a photo of your booth or your setup, take your banner out with your name on it. Because
that's an interesting point, because I think that is what the town of Cary does with Spring Days and Lazy Days.
Yes.
Is they look at and I'm on their festivals committee, but because I got on the festivals committee in 2020 and they haven't had a festival, where we've actually had to be jurying, I haven't been a part of the process. So I haven't seen how they do it. But that's what I understood, is that it's pretty much the work has to stand on its own. The other thing I would also add about photos, and this is something that I do with my festivals, is in the past, I was trying to download people's photos off their Facebook pages and Instagram pages in order for me to make posts leading up to my event, because I like to highlight the artists.
Right.
And so the better the photo in your application, the easier it is for me to lift that and post it and say, this artist is going to be at our event.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And especially for any application, like make it easy for other people to market for you. So if you're selected for the market already, if you have one of the top 10 best pictures and you get selected as one of the promo pictures, that helps the event, that makes your life easier. And also as the artist, they'll probably tag you, you can share it. So it's a win-win-win all around.
Oh yeah. I mean, that even applies to my food trucks and people like that. Like, give me great photos, I will use them.
Right. Yeah. Anytime you can make anyone else's life easier, it won't go unnoticed. That's what I have found.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that kind of brings up the idea of social media and your web presence. How important is that in your application? Obviously, if you have social media and a website, you want to include that on your application. But what about the quality of your social media? Like if you only post once a month, would that cut your chances? If your photos aren't necessarily consistent, would that cut it? Or is it more so just showing that you post on there?
Well, I would say for us, we do look at, do they have a lot of followers? because that does help us, if they're going to post, and I do send out like social media packets to all of my vendors and say, here's a way that you can help us with the market. So I
That's
give them
amazing,
hashtags, I do the, here's the at for, if you're going to at us, tag us, whatever. And I do, we do look at that. It doesn't mean that everyone that gets into our show has a great social media presence. Some artists
Right.
just, that's not their thing. They just aren't good at it.
Yeah.
But it is like what Jeannie would say, if you're giving points to an artist, you're going to weight them more heavily if they have a good following and if they also do quality posts, because that they're going to do a quality post and push out your event, to help get attendance up. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a valid point. How about you, Jeannie?
The social media, generally it'll come after the fact again. We'd be looking at the photos first. So this is either the Wake Forest Guild of Artists does, they have several different markets, or we might have several markets throughout the year. And then Arts Wake Forest plans the Wake Forest Holiday Artisans Market, which they've been doing that traditionally, which is about 60 participants in downtown Wake Forest in December. And they will first look at the photos, but when it comes down to making final decisions, we look at what goes on behind the scenes. If we're not sure about a certain photo or a certain artist, we'll check their social media, we'll check their website. Maybe we need to see a little bit more of their work. And we also want to see, are they active, like Lindsay said, because it's very important. It's not, it's up to the artist to help promote this also, to help promote a show or an event. It's not just the promoters, the market runners who have to do that, but the artists have to promote themselves too. So if they're doing that on social media, that could be what puts them over the edge.
I would agree for sure, because if you're seeing that somebody posts on a regular basis, or maybe they post that I'm going to be at this market, come see me, and they have a decent following, that just helps amplify an event. And
right. That helps everybody.
Yeah. And especially now, like you guys said, there are a lot more markets. There's suddenly things happening. And if you're trying to drive people to your event and there's a couple things happening that same day,
Right.
every little bit starts to add up and help. And it's just a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so at least what I'm hearing you guys say, it's not necessarily going to hurt your application, but it can only benefit your application by having that brand and that presence. And I think as artists and as you're applying to markets, that's a lot of the goal of going to these things, right? Is like to start establishing your brand and getting your presence well known. And that starts on social media, which is a great way to do it.
Exactly. And social media is Instagram and Facebook, and I guess Twitter. I'm not big on, I don't do much on Twitter, but Instagram and Facebook target pretty much two different demographics these days. So, and that's something really to keep in mind. I guess it also depends on who your target audience is, but my target audience is anywhere from teenagers up through octogenarians or older, whatever. It's right. So you want to use both platforms. Facebook these days tends to be an older demographic, and if you're just on Instagram, you're missing them.
Right. And a lot of those older folks have more disposable income.
Yes. Yes.
I was going to say Facebook, while it may be older, those folks have more money. They really do. The Instagrammers are going to be, picking up a $20 necklace or something, but your people who are older are going to pick up a $300 or $400 painting, or may commission you for stuff. Yes. So it's different. Yeah.
Very true.
Definitely something to look into. Well, speaking of money, why do shows charge application fees, booth fees? What are they used for? There's always that question of, is the show using it for marketing? Are they using it for profit? A combination of things? Is it for the time during, the applications? Like, tell us all the things. What are they used for?
A lot of things.
Yeah.
As far as application fees, depending on the format that the show uses for their application, the show has fees that they have to pay. So for every application that comes in, they may have a small fee that has to be paid somewhere for that. Or in the case of, say, I know Carrie uses different independent jurors for all, they use different jurors for every show. They're paying those jurors.
Right.
They're not necessarily committee members.
Well, Carrie also pays for a system that costs several thousand a year just to be able to host all of those photos, just for people to pay into. I looked into it for mine, and because I only did 2 shows a year, it wasn't worth it for me. But they do so many different things, and like Lazy Days and Spring Days has 300, they need to sort through probably 1,000 applications for Lazy Days and probably 500 for Spring Days. So they need a system that's very robust. I would say for my events, the application fee goes towards several things. One, this year we started doing an online form, and those folks charge us $30 a month just for the forms. And my event is a 6-month window. So there you are, $180 just for the hosting of the forms. But we felt like it was a good use of funds because it organized everything and created spreadsheets and captured all the information. So it was well worth it. The other things we pay for is we do paid advertising. We advertise in the indie. We do paid Facebook and Instagram ads, and those cost money.
Yeah.
And let's face it, our time is worth money.
Yes.
And,
needs to be
and it takes 6 months of planning for an event. And to be quite honest, my application fees for artists is the smallest part of my income for my events.
Yeah.
Sponsorships is actually what runs my events, but the artists have to have some skin in the game. They have to know that, this is a serious piece of their business and they have to pay for a fee. I know as a fine artist, when I apply just to have a piece in a art show,
Yeah.
$35 for an application. And if I don't get in, that $35 is just gone. So it's just part of doing business. And, don't apply for every single show. Apply for shows that you think you're going to get in and that you really want to get in. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, because it both from your end and from the artist end, it kind of adds a quality control aspect to make sure that, okay, if the artist is applying, that you really are serious about it and that you're not just applying to everything that you find. And as the artist, it does make you choose, okay, from a hierarchy, would I rather do this market or this market? If you have a set budget for, okay, this month I can spend X amount on applications, or maybe this quarter, and factoring that into your business expenses.
Right. And one thing that we do different as opposed to like when I'm applying for art shows as an artist is we do a very nominal application fee. It's $15. That gets all the information, that gets them juried. And until they're accepted, they don't pay that booth fee. And so the booth fee is separate from it. And that way we've still got all the information. We may even in the future just roll that over and then just be able to get people. We haven't figured that part out yet, but I really think that it allows us to have all that information hosted and we can keep it, which is good.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to clarify too. So if people have not done markets before, the difference between the application fee and the booth fee. So the application fee, typically, I don't know of any time where you get the money back. It's really to submit an application, you pay X amount. And then if you're selected, the actual table, your square, the booth costs this amount to participate. So there's almost 2 levels to it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And another thing too, that I would add to that too, is depending on the market, when it comes to booth fees, organizations are a little bit different in terms of when they're going to ask you for that money. So I know some folks will go all crazy applying, which is fine. I mean, they're eager, but do know that some organizations, some events will say, okay, well, you have 3 days, you have 1 week from the time of acceptance to pay it. other organizations or other events, you have more time, but do know you have to be prepared to pay that boost fee if you get accepted. So if you get accepted by several dates at the same time, they may run into each other. So just wanted to throw that out there because I have seen it. I have applied to where that's exactly what happened. And then I had to make a choice. Okay, I can afford this one, but not this one. I have to turn this one
and
down.
one thing I would say from the market runner's perspective is it's we don't know how many shows people have applied to, obviously, but it's when we accept someone, we expect them to accept us back, right? And because we're now making our list and we've accepted X amount of jewelers, and now 3 of my jewelers can't come. Now I've got to scramble and go back and tell people that were denied that they've got to be accepted. So it's try not to apply to things that are going to be the same day. Yeah, that's the one thing I would say.
Yeah, and I feel like that's definitely part of the acknowledging your art as a business and scheduling accordingly. Sometimes, especially applying to markets, can be that step of acknowledging that this is your business. But unfortunately, in addition to paying fees for applications, a big part of markets that many ask for is a sales tax number, which for many artists is very scary. So why do shows ask for this number, and how do you get one?
The shows ask for your sales tax number because North Carolina, as well as almost every other state, requires us to collect. It requires buyers to pay sales tax. So as a business owner that is selling a tangible item, the artists are required to collect sales tax from their customer. They are collecting the sales tax and then remitting it to the North Carolina Department of Revenue. We're not paying, the artists are not paying sales tax. They are collecting it from their customers for the state, and then they remit it to the state. Just like if you go into a boutique and you buy a dress or you buy a pair of shoes, you pay sales tax for that pair of shoes. The business owner then remits that money back to the state.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Did you want to say? And then it's very easy to get that sales tax account through North Carolina Department of Revenue. I think Cynthia's going to post that information. The market runners or the show promoters are also required to keep a record of that sales tax number from all of their participants. So the market runners should have a listing of those sales tax identification numbers from each participant. Technically, it's supposed to be on our presence at an event in case somebody comes, and they do. It's rare, but you never know when somebody is going to show up and ask for that list or take down the name of the different artists and check up on it.
Right. And it's you have to be thinking of yourself as a business. You're just not a brick and mortar business. You're a pop-up business, but yeah.
Yeah, but you are still running a business. You don't have to, let's see, you can actually, if you haven't registered a business name or you're not registered with the federal government with a federal EIN, you can register as a sole proprietor, and NCDOR uses your social security number. You don't give your social security number out to anybody. That's the number that they use as your account number, but then behind the scenes, but then you have a different number. It's generally a number that starts with a 6. I believe it's a 9-digit number, because that was a question that I originally had when I was collecting the numbers from participants, and I called NCDOR and I said, hey, which number do I want? And they told me it's that one. It's your account ID number. Because you have there's 2 different numbers.
And not an EIN, but a
right
sales tax number. Right.
Yes. And I had one, we had an artisan for, I think it was the spring market this year, that she said, well, I don't have one. I don't collect sales tax. And I was blunt with her and wrote back and I said, I'm sorry, we can't accept you then. That is the reason you are not being accepted. And I sent her the information from North Carolina Department of Revenue where it states she has to have one.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and that was a good learning opportunity for her because maybe then she got it and then she was accepted to other shows later. Who knows? But yeah.
Yeah. And know that it's pretty easy to do. Obviously, we're not accountants. We can't give you legal or tax advice, but do know the process, at least for the state of North Carolina, it's pretty straightforward. It only takes a few minutes to get it started. And then depending how you fill it out is whether you have to remit it monthly or quarterly. So, and it only takes a few minutes as long as you keep good records of your sales and the tax you're collecting, which is a whole different topic. We're not going to talk about today. But as long as
We
you
are
keep-
not licensed professionals.
No, and that's like a different workshop, panel discussion. We're not touching that today. But essentially, as long as you keep nice records and you don't spend the money
It's
that you
not very
collected
tough.
for the sales tax, please don't spend it, keep it aside. Then it's very, very straightforward, very easy. I know taxes sounds really scary. This is nothing like doing your year-end taxes. It's actually very, very easy to do. So just wanted to give you hope out there for anybody that's like, do I really have to? I don't want to. It's scary. It's not. It's very, very easy. It only takes a few minutes. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, we do have some extra time. So if you ladies are willing to take some questions, we have amazing questions from the chat, a little bit from all over the board. So the first one really about choosing markets. One question was, should fine artists focus on only fine art markets or apply for all different types of markets?
Really good question.
Yes.
It's a really good question. It's hard to know because some markets are known for having fine art. And if I was going to apply as a fine artist, I would go to those because fine art tends to be more expensive. And if people are looking for that, like if they're looking for a painting for their house, are they going to buy that on a whim? Maybe not, so I would say like the bigger markets like Art Splosion or Spring Days or Lazy Days, things that are known as fine art would be where I would concentrate on. I would not do Raleigh pop-up or Raleigh night market if I had fine art because people are looking for something that's under $100, So, you have to kind of pick your spot, and fine art is more difficult to display. And just by its very nature, I can see your paintings behind you. They're going to be more expensive, more finished. You've got to frame them, so there's a lot more considerations than somebody who's painting a flower pot and putting a cactus in it. I mean, it's just different.
Right. The transportation, the display is a whole other factor.
Packaging it when you have to get it to the site, it's, so, it's expensive. Things can get broken. You just really have to think about it.
Yeah. And typically, like we were talking about earlier with the booth fees, the booth fee might be more expensive because they know that the people attending the event are looking to spend more money. So that's also something to weigh.
Yeah.
Very often, a market or an event that's hosted by an art council will have fine art, like the Arts Wake Forest. The Wake Forest, even though it's called a holiday artisans market, there are a number of fine artists that are in that event. So if it's run by an art council, there will be fine art there. There'll be some fine art there.
Right. And people will know that. People who are attendees have probably come before. They're looking for home decor. They've purchased in the past and they're eager to come back. Like, for instance, here's a great example. My parents, we moved a lot as kids. When I was a kid, everywhere we moved, they went to art shows because they wanted art from local artists. And
That's
they wanted
amazing.
they were looking for paintings of where they lived, so they were looking for things that were expensive, because that was part of their home, so it's different.
Yeah, and something else I would add to that from experience, and obviously I'll let you guys add to this as well, is for, say, someone that's starting out that has never done a market, chances are if you're new to the scene, so to speak, and you try to go into a fine art only show, you're not going to get in. You probably don't have the setup in terms of the quality of your art. Maybe it's not quite to par. So no reason to turn up the nose at some of the, I like to call them general purpose markets, because you may have a potter and a jeweler and somebody that does treats, dog treats across from you, etc. But especially if you've never done a market before, a lot of times that is a great place to get your feet wet.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily, and obviously, again, I'll let you all weigh in, but they're not necessarily as stringent. You have to have a white tent. You have to have a white table. You know, they tend to be a little bit
In the
more
walls.
relaxed. Yeah. So
Mhm.
obviously you can't expect them selling $1,200 paintings in this kind of situation, but it might be the place to try, you know.
And get experience under
And
your
well,
feet.
and your chances of getting accepted is probably going to be better with a smaller application and or booth fee as well. So yeah,
And
it might be a
also-
stepping stone.
I would also point out too that it'll give you a chance to check out how to set things up.
Yeah.
Because a new artist isn't going to have all of those, you know, the fancy backgrounds and the hanging, you know, because when you go to Lazy Days, like some of these people have these serious setups on how to hang their framed glass photographs and stuff like that. And that takes a while to develop that kind of cash flow, even to be able to do that setup, you know. So that's a good point.
And or you may try it and decide markets are not for you, fine art or not. So
Yes, exactly.
just had to throw that one out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question that came from the chat. So thank you all. And again, keep them coming if you have more. Can markets or could markets include watermarks to protect the artist, or should the artist submit the images with them if they think they will be used for promotional material?
So in terms of marketing on social media, do the markets ask permission for the images, or should all artists assume that whatever they apply is essentially fair game in terms of promotional material?
That's really interesting. One thing that I'm doing with my event coming up this year is instead of just posting a photo, I'm making a template where I have it say the name of the event, the name of the artist, and then suck the photo into the template so that it isn't just the art. And I think that might help because it's identifying the art in the post with the name of the artist.
Right. So it'd be, I mean, I guess someone technically could still grab it, but it would be a lot more effort. And it also does highlight the artist, because there is, from that marketing standpoint, you want to be able to celebrate and share each other's work. So I think that's a kind of a great in between too.
Yeah.
A lot of events will ask if your work can be used for promotion
In the application.
in the application. So that will often be a question in the application. I have never seen any of those promotional photos watermarked.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't have an answer to that because I've never seen that happen. It's not recommended to watermark your jury photos though.
Yeah.
Because that's a distraction.
Right.
Yeah. And like you were saying, especially if it is a blind jury, then
You just
that
give it away.
instantly you can't use any of those images if your name is over top of the entire thing.
Right.
I do like what Jeannie said, because it's something that maybe I'll do on my next round of applications is maybe like a disclaimer, or what people would do, like that's preschool and they say photos of your child may be used in promotion,
Right.
you know, kind of like a release form that's saying like, if you submit this application, it is understood that the photos you've submitted could be used in promotion for the event, or something like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a good clarification. Obviously, I feel like in the form of like community, we all just want to lift each other up. We want to help promote each other. The event wants to promote the artist wants to promote the event. So it all comes from a spirit of sharing.
but maybe having a disclaimer like that on applications or reading through an application to see what are the rights to the images will just be helpful so everyone's on the same page. Another question that came up was in regard to insurance. So this was right before we talked about sales tax, but are there any particular types of insurance that are ever required at a market, whether liability insurance or any type of other things besides the sales tax number that would be required?
Some events do require the participants to have insurance. The ones that I've been involved in promoting, we don't require the artists to have insurance. I personally have insurance through, it's ACT, it's artists, crafters, and I don't remember what the T stands for, but it's ACT Pro Insurance, I think, is where you would find their website. I can always look that up and send it to Cynthia or send it on.
Yeah.
And they have a show policy, which is $30 or $40 per show, which includes liability, or they have an annual policy, which is under $300 for the year. And it also includes, it's called Inland Marine, but it covers you when you're traveling. It covers your show setup. Unfortunately, for any artist work, from my understanding from a lot of artists that I've talked to about any insurance company, is it only covers, as far as your work, it covers the cost of your materials. It doesn't cover the retail value of it.
Yes, that's a tough thing.
But if your tent gets destroyed, whether by weather or somebody running into it at an event, sorry, that's been my experience. There's generally a deductible, but it would replace your tent, it would replace your setup materials, that sort of thing. There we go, Cynthia found it. That's one insurance company. There are others out there.
Yeah. But all in all, it will be specified in the application, correct? So not all markets require it, but if it does, it will include that in the application.
Yes.
Whether it's required or optional or highly suggested.
Yes.
That just reminded me, I'm like, please wait your tents. Don't let them fly into somebody else's tent.
That's something that we require in our events. We tell people whether they can stake if we're on grass, and we always say, it can be windy, so please bring weights. At the very least, those round weights that you put on the corners. Yeah.
Another one of the questions that we got in the chat. This one's a tough one. How much inventory should you have for a market? I'm going to say too, if it's a holiday market, that might be a different answer than any other time of the year, right?
Yeah. You need to bring as much as you want to sell.
Yeah, there might not be a clear answer to this one.
It's really a tough question to answer.
I do have a mathematical answer.
Do you?
Yes, I do. So what I like to tell artists is that for most artists, if you sold 30 to 40% of the contents of your booth at a market, that would be a great show. So you can do the math. If you sell items that are $5 and you bring 100 of them, so then you would sell, 30 of them, that's $150, but you've paid $80 to be in the show, then you haven't made any money. So if that doesn't make sense to you, this is a little pitch. We have a lot of pricing and budgeting classes that we teach at Triangle Artworks, and that's what I do teach one. We talk about that, but you really do have to do the math about sort of figure that you're probably not going to sell more than 30 to 40% of what you bring. So if you look around what you consider a fully stocked booth and you only have $300 or $400 worth of your work, you can't, you're probably not going to have $1,000 day. literally can't do it. So that's an important thing for artists to consider when they're trying to decide if they have enough work yet to do a show. Lindsay mentioned already that, you do have to build up inventory to do some of these bigger shows. You can't have a $5,000 weekend if you have $500 worth of stuff in your booth.
Right. And I think that's a great point too, of making sure that things are priced appropriately, which is why the triangle artwork classes are so amazing, because selling out of your booth completely is not necessarily the goal. If you sell everything, that might mean that your pricing was off. So, or you just brought for a different clientele, then maybe you should have brought those $1,000 paintings and not things that were $20. So that's a very good point, and a great ever evolving skill as an artist to keep learning is pricing and budgeting and planning for these types of events.
Yeah. And
also,
another,
if you have a lot of events, you need to make sure that you have time to make in between so that you continue having enough inventory. Like if you sell everything out and then you have another show in 2 weeks, like how are you going to get that done? Right.
Right. Definitely give your future self a break and plan out, okay, best case scenario, is there a week or 2 or 3 buffer where you can replenish the inventory?
yeah. And another thing too is if you have a variety of price points, that will probably increase your chances, because not everybody that's going there is going to spend all the money. So if you have a variety of price points, it might be that all your cheap stuff, so to speak, right, is selling faster, etc. Don't lose heart. Sometimes people will buy something small to support you. They'll come back and buy bigger stuff later on, or more expensive things. So if nothing else, you can think of it as a marketing expense, right?
Right.
You're handing out business.
Yeah.
That doesn't run me. Bring
cards.
business cards. Give business cards to every single human you set eyes upon, because you never know what door that might open. So yes, don't lose heart. Maybe the sales weren't that great. Maybe that big showcase painting you brought or piece of jewelry you brought didn't sell. Maybe it was the smaller stuff, but that could definitely open the doors to bigger sales down the road. So
Yeah.
Stay positive.
Yeah, they're definitely ways to gauge success as an artist. And so I know we do have a few more minutes before we wrap up. So I did want to get one last question in, and then you two can add anything that you feel like. Or if someone is brand new to applying to a market, what advice would you have to the artist applying for a show?
Wow. Really think about your display.
Okay.
For sure. What is it going to look like? Don't kind of throw it together when you get to a show. And I think Jeannie was saying before, if you can set up even a mock booth and take a picture of that so that people get a really good idea of what you have. Another thing is, like you had touched on it, I think, Adriana, with the, make sure you have a business card.
Yeah.
And that it has your email on it, your website, whatever social media you have. Because people like me tour around in these markets, and I'm looking for people from my market. And if you don't have an email address on your card, I can't contact you.
True.
And some people's business cards only has their social media on it. And it's very frustrating, because then I've got to DM them and, all that.
Right.
So try to have your business card have as much complete information as possible.
And your business card should also be representative of your art.
Yes.
So even if it's one picture of your art, design your business card. Don't just get a generic card, but have something that people can remember you by. My business card was designed 10 years ago, and I still use the front of it, but on the back, I put a collage of my more recent silversmith pieces so that people will remember who I am from those pictures. So you do want to make sure that the business card represents you, and it's not just one you pick off of Vistaprint.
Right. Because it's a visual reminder for people. Mm-hmm. Like they're going to look at that card, and hopefully a piece of the art that they just saw is on that card, or your face with the piece of art, so that they're like, yeah, I talked to that person, and they may buy something off your website. Yeah.
Awesome. That is very, very good advice, and how, especially once you get to a show, how you can really make it the best that it could possibly be. Because really just sharing with other artists as well and building that community with the vendors around you is a great benefit of being at a show. So that is very good advice. Now, I know we are hitting at time, so I want to thank everybody for hopping on this call tonight. Thank you for all of the amazing questions, and to our two wonderful panelists for your amazing time and insight.
Thank you so much. It was fun to be on.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, that's all we have for today. Again, thank you everybody for joining us. The recording of this meeting will be part of the Art Studio Insights podcast that both Jackie and myself host, and it will be released next Tuesday. So if you follow us on social media, we will have all the links there for you. That's all we got for tonight.
All right.
Thank
Have
you
a
so
good night,
much,
guys.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, so we really hope that you enjoyed this panel discussion, and we hope to make more of them in the future. But for now,
As always, both of our blogs will be linked in the show notes below, as well as information about both the panelists and Triangle Artworks, so you can stay up to date with their upcoming events. We will also link in our personal blogs all that information and links to different resources talked about in the panel.
and if you want to stay connected with us in between episodes and share what you have learned, you can follow us both on social media, MMA Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio across all platforms. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.